Hey, what's going on everybody? Nick here, back with another lockdown fly tying video. And as I was sitting at the vise this morning, it occurred to me that it's chum fry season, and going through my boxes, I am willfully unprepared for that. It's not looking like I'll really be able to fish this chum fry season, but I figured I might as well start tying some up. I had a fair amount of chum babies, but as far as other options go, I was pretty limited. A bunch of beat up older ones, but definitely needed some help. So I'm going to be tying up a real simple surf candy style chum fry pattern. Fishing this the last couple of years pretty successfully. I've said it a lot, but I'm not the world's biggest chum fry fan as far as the whole out migration and the fishing that it provides. It can provide some great fishing. It seems, especially in the South Sound, if you catch it right when it gets going, there's enough fry around to get the fish kind of motivated to eat, and they're out hunting. But there's not so many that they can get lazy and selective with their feeding. I've had better chum fry fishing over on Hood Canal, but after it gets going for a little while in the areas that I fish in the South Sound, it can get maddeningly frustrating. There's just so many fry around most years that the fish are just not, they're just lazy when it comes to their feeding. You drift through a stretch of beach, cover it with several flies, not see much of anything, and look back and watch 2-3 fish just come up and grab a handful of fry and go back down to the bottom. So it can be pretty frustrating, but I like to have different options to throw at them. This one is pretty simple, surf candy style, which I really like, and it's been fairly productive for me. So to get started, I've got a Ahrex SA 280 minnow hook, size 6. I'm going to keep this one fairly small. This is more for those like smaller, earlier fry, I guess. But you can tie this in whatever size you want and basically whatever hook you want. And I'm using some mono thread. I use mono with all of my surf candy style flies, just to kind of let the colors of the materials shine through the body. So I'm just going to get that thread started, tie a base down to about the start of the bend of the hook, thereabouts, and come back up to right behind the eye of the hook. First material is going to be some pearl or translucent, what is this stuff? Senyo's Predator Wrap. And this one is fairly picked clean already, but I'll see if I can make do. Just going to get a decent little clump of this. I want this to be pretty sparse in general. Just going for a pretty slender, pretty small fly. So I'm just gonna, because I had to kind of pick off of this, I couldn't get the cut that I wanted, so I'm gonna pluck these ends just a little bit, just to give them a little unevenness, since I had to cut it kind of goofy. A couple wanky ones there. And I'm going to just tie this in right behind the eye, and I'm going, this was only maybe 1.25 inches, not super long. Actually, I'm going to trim this first. Trim these nice and flush so that I don't get too many hairs going crazy up here. And then tie that in right behind the eye. And just like I've done with bucktail, if I kind of hold the material up off the hook a little bit and use the thread to pull it down, it'll get on there nice and straight. Okay. Next is a barred olive, also Senyo Predator Wrap. This is a really cool color. It's kind of a medium olive with black barred going down it, and since chum fry have those par marks, I like to use something that's barred. You could use plenty of different materials for this. You could tie it pretty basic and then just take a marker and add par marks. You could just go without them altogether. Who knows if it matters. But I like this barred olive Predator Wrap. So I'm just going to measure this out. I want it to be a little bit longer than the white, which would be the belly. Get measured how I want it, and then trim those ends nice and flush. I'm going to tie this one in just slightly back from where I tied in the white, and that just helps keep the front of this thing being super blunt and goofy looking. Tie that down just like I did with the underside. That's going to be it. You can go crazy with different materials. Sometimes I put barred voodoo fibers on top of this. I don't. Sometimes I use different dubbings. I really like this stuff. I use Ripple Ice fiber for this quite a bit, especially on the next size or two up. But since I'm keeping this one pretty small, I like the Predator wrap. So I'm just the two materials. Now comes the fun part. I'm using some, these are 3mm adhesive red eyes with a black pupil. You can use whatever color you want. These ones are from Fly Tires Dungeon. I get all my adhesive eyes there. They're super cheap, and except for the real fancy ones for just the basic adhesive eyes, I usually go with these. And these small eyes can be a little bit of a hassle to work with. I'm just going to try to place them into position where I want them. Sometimes I'll use super glue for this. I prefer not to, but sometimes you have to. These don't want to stay. Like this one doesn't have very good adhesive, I guess. Let's try this again. And of course it dropped down into a pile of leftover trimmings from flies, so it's got all kinds of gunk on it. So then I'm going to try to line those up as best I can. That looks pretty good. Now I'm taking some UV resin. This is Deer Creek Fine UV resin, really thin. Get it in there. Uh-oh. My eyes getting a little goofy on me. There we go. Get some in right between the two eyes. Let it kind of soak down in there. Hit that with the light. That'll start to really get those eyeballs. They're pretty secure now, so you don't have to worry about them starting to slide all over the side of the body. I see that one moved a little bit, but that's alright. I'm going to do the same thing on the underside. Just get some resin in there between the eyes. Let that soak and hit it. As far as what resins to use, you know, everybody's different. I've used most of them. My favorite really was Solares, but I developed an allergy to it to the point that I just can't even use it. I did not stay where I want. Nowadays I use kind of a mix of Gulf and Deer Creek and Raid Zap. They're all great. So now I'm going to take some thin resin. This is the Raid Zap. And I'm going to start kind of shaping this body. I like to just kind of get some on there and sort of dab it about. I really want to keep this whole body fairly sparse. I don't want to go crazy with this stuff, but I want it to be covered up well, and I want to kind of get the profile that I want. And then usually I'm able to just use the rotary on my vise. This stuff, this thin Raid Zap, it's fairly thin. It'll move around pretty easily. Keep a toothpick or two around my desk for this purpose, just to kind of help shape. If you use kind of a double-edged sword, you can use a little thicker, more viscous resin, but then you have to deal with it building up bulk quicker. So it's sort of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I guess. I use the thin. But most of the time I can basically just use my vise, spin it fairly quickly, and when it looks like it's more or less in the shape that I want, it's kind of holding there, and I'll just hit it as I'm spinning, try to lock it in where it was, and then I'll kind of slow it down and just make sure I hit that whole thing. If you ever looked at a chum fry in the water, they're very slim, very slender things. They're not overly bulky. They can almost be translucent at times. So I'm keeping this pretty small and sparse. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little more of this thin UV resin, and I'm going to just grab all these fibers and kind of hold them together tight, and then I'm going to get a decent amount of resin on there, and I'm going to just use the tip of this bottle to kind of pull that resin back, work it into the fibers. I want this to be good and stiff. This is where you're going to avoid fouling, but I don't want it to go the whole length of the materials. I want the back of those materials to be able to move a little bit. So just getting that good and soaked in there. I like to put some generally right at the point where the materials meet the body that you formed there. And then just making sure that I've got these straight. I'm going to hit that again. So total length, this is about probably 1 3/4 inches, I would guess. Now as is, this would fish just fine. I'm going to go back over this with a little more resin and just give the body a little more profile to it that's pleasing to my eye. Not much that it's actually going to accomplish, but just going to use a little bit more. This is the thin. Make sure that transition from the tail to the body is good and secure. I find these little applicator tips like this to be pretty useful for working with this stuff. You can kind of push it around and shape it. Sometimes I'll tie these with a little lead on them, but I usually use my line to get my flies down, so I'm not that worried about that. Okay. Now one little final addition. I'm going to add just a little bit of a hot spot. This is Gulf orange, fluorescent orange colored UV resin. Kind of fun to play around with. I like to just add a little orange hot spot just kind of under the eyes. Could be gills or egg sac or who knows, but I just like to add that little bit of orange in there. Just trying to get it so it's fairly smooth. It looks nice and smooth before I shine it under the light, and then it looks like it's a little jagged little mountain right there, but that's alright. And I'm going to take just a touch more thin UV resin and just put it right up here by the head. Something about this, it just doesn't look quite right to me, so I'm just going to, there we go. Makes absolutely no difference as far as its fishability. but just wasn't quite pleasing to my eye. So that's pretty much all she wrote. I said sometimes I'll tie these larger, get a little more bulk on the body. The ones that I've been tying this morning are these sort of the smaller, sparser ones, so that's what I went with here. But there you go, super simple. You can mess around with different materials. Of course, you can use bucktail, various synthetics, flashes. Like I said, I like Ripple ice fiber a lot. But play around with it. Add a few of these box. If we get a chance to fish this chum fry season, it'd be a good chance to test them out. If not, there's always next year. I like to think of those fish out there just gorging on fry. None of us out there to harass them. It's kind of a pleasing thought. I also want to go catch those fish, so it kind of works both ways. Give it a shot. If they work for you, love to hear about it. And as always, thanks for watching.